In this video, we're picking back up with reading comprehension drill set number 2 over at lawhub.lsac.org. And I'm going to hit this resume button, which you can always click if you wanted to pause one of your prior drills. You can just hit this close button up top and it'll pick up right where you left off. And we are, as always, going to select our highlighting tool and begin engaging with the passage up front, even though you might look at the question stem here for number 7 and say, isn't this a detail question? Not really is usually the answer. If you've got a question task asking you to go find something without any term or location reference, it probably is what we categorize as a hidden main idea question task. So even though we're being asked which one of the statements can be inferred from each of the passages, we really know that we're going to be looking for the main idea. So rather than trying to hunt and peck for this individual question, we're going to go straight to passage A and start reading and doing our highlighting process of reading the paragraph in full, thinking about what the main idea is, and then highlighting a maximum of 2 sentences to capture that main idea. So starting at the top, Charles Darwin is a sterling example of someone who understood the essential tension in science between commitment to the well-established theories and explanations that constitute the scientific status quo and willingness to explore and accept new and sometimes strange ideas. It is this tension that underlies the understanding of the history of science as a series of paradigm shifts in which a set of ideas and theories becomes well established and widely accepted over time, only to be quickly overturned and replaced by a radically new set of ideas and theories. Such a paradigm shift occurs only when the preponderance of the scientific community is willing to abandon the established ideas and theories in favor of new ones. But such a shift is more than just a revision of the general beliefs and practices of the scientific community. It is also a change in the cognitive framework in the minds of individuals. And you can glance ahead to what the subject is of the next topic sentence for the second paragraph here, and we see that Darwin shows up again. So we need to think about that as we're looking for what the overall main idea sentence is of this first paragraph. And I would say it is, in fact, the topic sentence stating that Darwin is this sterling example of the essential tension between status quo and new ideas. And then I'd probably pick up this next sentence just to kind of summarize everything that comes afterwards. I don't need to explain how the paradigm shift occurs and what the details are, but with these 2 sentences highlighted, I certainly get the main idea. Now, we'll scroll down and we're going to just frame it up so that we can keep the sentence above as much as possible, understanding that you will have the full passage only view on the official prep test and the official exam when you take it. But for now, we'll pick up with the second paragraph. 3 characteristics of Darwin's intellect and personality mark him as a scientist who found the right balance in this essential tension, a balance that helped him accomplish a major paradigm shift. First, although Darwin had respect for the opinions of his scientific peers, he excelled at challenging authority and thinking for himself. Second, Darwin placed a high value on considering evidence that appeared to run counter to his views. As a result, his critics rarely presented him with a challenge that he had not already addressed. And third, Darwin was able to tap the collective resources of the scientific community and enlist other scientists as collaborators. Darwin's collected correspondence numbers over 16,000 extant letters, most of which involve lengthy scientific discussions. And once again, we want the big picture. So even though we get these 3 different characteristics in detail, I don't grab them as the main idea. We know that this topic sentence really nicely leads into everything afterwards. So if we need details on those characteristics, we'll read about them later. But for now, I would say we've appropriately highlighted this first passage. So scrolling down to passage B, once again, I'm going to frame it up and just pick up at passage B. Scientists need to exhibit at least 3 modes of thought: curious, creative, and critical. And we might think to ourselves, well, this is really building on what we just talked about. So now we know that we've got the good main idea highlighted sentences up front in passage A because we're maintaining this subject matter in passage B. So once again, scientists need to exhibit at least 3 modes of thought: curious, creative, and critical. These requirements come sharply into focus when one deals with anomalous phenomena. For example, astrophysicists I'm just going to call them HA and WT just because the initials are enough. I don't need to be pronouncing their names, and it will just expedite my evaluation, understanding that I'm basically going to treat these individuals as largely variables within a story that I don't have a lot of background in. So, once again, for example, astrophysicists HA and WT have claimed for years that there is evidence indicating that our interpretation of the red shift of distant astronomical objects, the systematic shift of light emanating from these objects towards the red end of the visual spectrum, is incomplete. Their results, if taken at face value, contradict the usual assumption that the observed redshift of these objects, such as distant galaxies and quasars, is almost entirely due to an ongoing expansion of the universe. A and T have been curious in examining strange patterns found in their early observations. They have been creative in trying to devise an interpretation of their results, and they have been critical of their own work by seeking new observations and encouraging others to make independent observations. And this is a perfect exemplar of how you don't want to get bogged down in the details about redshift of distant astronomical objects. We know we were talking about the creativity of Darwin in the first passage, so that must be our main idea for the second passage as well. And I'd probably just highlight this first and last sentences, which are focused more on the creativity of the mode of scientific discovery as opposed to the details about HA and WT's actual discovery. So scrolling down to finish out the second paragraph or the second paragraph of the second passage. However, the astrophysics community has by and large applied only the critical mode of thought to the same problem. There have been some attempts to reproduce A and T's results with mixed success, but the general attitude has been it cannot happen, therefore it does not happen, instead of the more open, if it does happen, it can happen. As a result, A and T have come to be regarded somewhat as heretics. Well, again, we're concerned more about the mode of thought, so I'd highlight this first sentence as the main idea for the final paragraph of passage B. It's at your discretion if you want to highlight this second sentence of this final paragraph of the dual passage structure here. You certainly don't need to highlight that bit about them being heretics. That's certainly secondary, even though it's eye catching. And we'll just highlight it because there's not much else. But as always, we're going to read our highlighted sentences in full as a final check to make sure that we do have an overall coherent narrative through each of these two science passages, beginning at the first paragraph of passage A. Charles Darwin is a sterling example of someone who understood the essential tension in science between commitment to the well-established theories and explanations that constitute the scientific status quo and willingness to explore and accept new and sometimes strange ideas. It is this tension that underlies the understanding of the history of science as a series of paradigm shifts, in which a set of ideas and theories becomes well-established and widely accepted over time, only to be quickly overturned and replaced by a radically new set of ideas and theories. Three characteristics of Darwin's intellect and personality mark him as a scientist who found the right balance in this essential tension, a balance that helped him accomplish a major paradigm shift. Scientists need to exhibit at least three modes of thought: curious, creative, and critical. A and T have been curious in examining strange patterns found in their early observations. They have been creative in trying to devise an interpretation of their results, and they have been critical of their own work by seeking new observations and encouraging others to make independent observations. However, the astrophysics community has, by and large, applied only the critical mode of thought to the same problem. There have been some attempts to reproduce A and T's results with mixed success, but the general attitude has been it cannot happen, therefore it does not happen, instead of the more open, if it does happen, it can happen. So we should have a good overall understanding of the main idea, the big picture topics of these two passages in tandem. So now we're going to go to our answer choices, keeping the highlighting tool selected, trying to find something that fits these main ideas without going and hunting and pecking for each choice individually, because that's just not an efficient use of your time. So starting with choice A. Science would progress more rapidly if it were more open to new theories than it traditionally has been. To be honest, we might leave this one open and go, well, at least we're talking about this idea of like new ideas within science. So we'll not eliminate this immediately. But then choice B, there have been only a few major theoretical shifts in the history of science. As soon as I see only a few major theoretical shifts, I go, well, we didn't quantify this at all, so we can eliminate choice B pretty readily. Then, choice C, major theoretical changes within science have most often been triggered by anomalous observations. Again, this is a qualifier that isn't defined, most often been triggered, so I'd highlight that bit and eliminate C pretty immediately as well. Then, choice D, the individual traits of scientists have an impact on the nature and success of their work. Well, we were just talking about A and T and Darwin, and this seems pretty good at this point, so I'd probably proactively select D, again, without even rereading anything from the passage after we read our highlights. And lastly, choice E, success in science depends on convincing the scientific establishment that one's theories are creative and original. We didn't talk about convincing the establishment at all. This word depends is probably extreme, so we can eliminate choice E. And if we're down to A and D, we want to look for reasons to eliminate rather than to select. And this qualifier of would progress more rapidly than traditionally, we go, well, that's a comparison that isn't explicitly outlined within the passages at all. So once again, you can see how you can use those main idea highlights in your upfront read to answer a hidden main idea topic such as this for a science passage without having to go hunt and peck for each individual answer choice.